this week's video, I want to help you decide whether soil blocking is going to work for you. So I'm going to cover the top 5 pros and cons of what I feel is important when considering whether to soil block or not. Hi, I'm Nicola from Cutting Garden Flowers, and I want to help inspire you create space in your garden for cut flowers so that you can fill your house with flowers without guilt. So you may be wondering what soil blocking is, and it's using a piece of equipment like this where it creates multiple blocks of soil, compacted blocks of soil for you to sow your seeds in. So they come in various sizes. So this is the smallest, this I think is the next size up, and within the larger one, well actually within the small one, it's got a divot that will be formed at the top of the soil block for you to place your seed into. In the larger one, you can get different tips to the block that will do different things. So it can create a more rounded one for you to put the seed in, so you can start them off straight away in these bigger blocks, or you can have this shaped divot in, which is the same size as each of these blocks. So in theory, you start your seed off in the smaller one, then when they're established and good to move on, you create the larger ones with the divots in that are the size of these, and you then just pick up the smaller block and place it in the top of the larger block where this hole has been made. So in theory, this is all you need, plus some sort of tray to put your soil into. So that is the theory of soil blocks. So you're using equipment like this to create the blocks without the need of the usual plastic containers. So whatever else you could sow your seeds in, and let's be honest, you can sow seeds into anything, whether it's a yogurt pot, egg boxes, or a plastic seed tray. So that's the difference. Now, instructions on your seed packets will be for your standard seed sowing, so it will be expecting you to have the normal compost and sowing it into some sort of container, or putting the compost into some sort of container and planting your seeds into that, and then covering it with however much layer is required for that particular seed. So the instructions are for standard seed sowing, but in the new world, or the thing that's becoming popular in the flowering world at the moment, is this seed blocking, and it's because it's got several positives about it, which I will go into in this video. Number 1, it's environmentally friendly. So soil blocking means that you are creating little blocks of soil that grows your seed. So other than the tray that the soil blocks sit in, there is nothing else required to grow your seed. So it's environmentally friendly because you're no longer having to buy all of the plastic pots to grow on seeds, whether they are individual modules, whether they are trays that you've bought, or whether single-use trays or more sturdy trays. You are eliminating that use of plastic. Now, in theory, that's plastic as well, I can hear you say. But this was, I didn't buy this, this came with a takeaway pot. So, you know, I'm reusing until it's no longer required. this one is split, so it needs to go in the bin. So I would have had this anyway. So I'm not buying plastic to grow on my seeds. So that's where the environmental friendliness comes into. This is new trays. It is fiberglass, so not necessarily plastic, and this will last for years and years and years. It's sturdy. It was in the sale, so I bought a few of them, but it will last for ages. So from an environmental perspective, growing seed blocks of seeds is beneficial for the environment. Point 2 in the pros list. It's better root development. So the plants, the seedlings that grow, have got better root growth in them, and that's because if you can see, each block is divided. Each block, as the name goes, each cell is a block in its own right. So the roots can't grow past the air block. So each air wall effectively stops growth of roots going onwards. So what that does is it encourages more lateral, smaller root development, which helps build a sturdier, healthier root base for the plants to grow. Point 3, it's cost effective. So in theory, once you've got your plastic base, all you need is your soil block kit, and that's it. You don't need to buy any trays. So if you are purchasing the single-use plastic trays, then you don't need to do that anymore, or you don't need to buy these longer lasting trays, which are more expensive. Now, don't get me wrong, this piece of kit is quite expensive to start with, but because it will last and it's a one-time purchase, then in the long term, if you add up over several years of buying trays, then this will be cheaper than having to buy individual trays every year. In addition, and I've got to say it, seed germination rates vary. So if you use soil blocking, you are only using a tiny amount of compost for each individual cell for that seed to grow in. So not only are you being more considerate with your seeds, so you sow less of them, you are also using less compost at this point in time. The trick then lies in what you then do with these blocks. So if you then transplant them into trays of compost to grow on, so if you pot them on into those trays, then have you saved any compost? Possibly not, other than if you've got really poor germination, such as this. This set of plants here, these were all planted at the same time. This set of seeds here, nothing has grown. So I would have wasted that compost in a tray, and actually I've only wasted a little bit for them not growing there. So in a way, the compost is, it helps you make sure that you are not wasting an awful lot of compost for each set of seeds that you sow. 4 is it's space saving. So I have to say that I created, you can see in the distance, probably not, I potted up, created soil blocks for 3 trays worth of seeds this spring. And I created them at my parents' house. So I wasn't here and I needed some way of being able to continue to sow but equally be able to transport them back once they were done, because this is the growing season and I had to be there. So I've planted a whole garden's worth of seeds on these white trays in just a very small space. There's no way I could have planted all of these seeds and transported them if I was potting them in trays. So in that basis, it has been brilliant at space saving, and that would work for you as well. If you've not got a greenhouse, you've only got inside to sow your seeds, then you can start them off on these trays or Tupperware pots on your windowsill. Easy. It takes up virtually no space, and you can get an awful lot of plants sown in that space. You then have to pot them up, so you still need a bit of space afterwards as you pot them up as they grow. But to start them off, it's very much a space-saving exercise. And if you time them right, it could be that these little seedlings will be big enough and strong enough to go directly outside, so you don't need to plant them up into extra trays anyway. And finally, the 5th pro for soil blocking is that they are easy to transplant. So each little block contains your seedling, of which you then can pick up. There we go. You can pick up that seedling and plant it in another piece of compost, another big or small soil block, whatever your process is. So they are easy to transplant without disturbing root growth, and therefore prevents transplant shock. So the plant doesn't know it's moved, but you've given it more space to grow without it knowing. So it's brilliant for transplanting on. So now let's move on to the cons. As I think I've already made you aware, you have to buy specialist equipment, and this is not cheap. I think this kit, so it's 2 soil blocks and some extra pods that go inside, nipples that go inside to form different divots in the soil, cost me in the region of £40 last year. Now obviously I never need to pay that again. However, this seed tray cost me £2.99. It's a deep seed tray. It will last me for years. So again, if you buy quality equipment such as long-lasting seed trays over flimsy, cheap, use once seed trays, then actually the specialist equipment that you need for soil blocking will take several years before you've got a return on that investment. So, you know, if this is just a starting hobby, then maybe start with your normal seed trays and move on to soil blocking if you find you need to sow more, have more space, or be able to sow more in a smaller space. Con 2. It's time consuming. I can't deny creating the compost, creating it the right consistency, making sure there's enough water, making sure it sticks together properly, then filling this up with the compost, leveling it off, put it on the trays. It all takes time and it takes experience. So the first set of seeds that I was sowing this year took me forever to create these things into the soil blocks into these plastic pots. Now I was trying to squeeze 2 sets of these plastic blocks in here. That was maybe my mistake. If I just left it with 1 set in there, it might have been easier. I have to admit, doing them on these trays was infinitely easier. And I got 6 of these blocks onto each tray. So that's a lot of seed space in just one tray, but it takes time. And this also goes into con 3. So con 3 is the watering regime that you have to do. You have to water these trays. You have to stay on top of the water. I've been finding with the trays being in the greenhouse, so it's getting quite a lot of warmth in here, quite a lot of daylight, I'm having to water them every single day. It doesn't take much water and it's not difficult to water, but I have to remember to do it. Sometimes life gets in the way, and if I forget, the blocks are really quite solid, and if you leave it too long, then the health of the plant will significantly be harmed. The seed trays that I planted 2 weeks prior to the seed blocks get watered maybe every 3 days, maybe every week. Certainly I was away for 2 weeks and they didn't get watered once. So the watering regime is so much easier in the trays, and you've got a bit more control over it. So again, a drawback for these trays is if you have minimum time or don't know that you could get distracted, then the soil blocks really require a lot of attention to keep going. Point 4 in the cons. What you can plant in a soil block is less forgiving. Soil blocks are less forgiving with the seeds. So, as an example, I planted the Cerinthe major, so it's this first row here, this first row in the first block here, Cerinthe. I've got 1 seed out of it. They're quite big seeds, they're quite small blocks, so, you know, it was pushing my luck to see whether anything would grow. I have now got 1. That has taken probably a good 3 weeks to germinate. So that's where we are on that. This small tray of Cerinthe major was planted 2 weeks earlier than that seed block. That's what we've got there. Now, I don't know about you, but these look healthier and more of them. Admittedly, the seeds, there was less seeds sown in the soil block, so there is 5 seeds in that seed block. I've obviously got more in this seed tray, and I've got my usual rogue tomato in there. So I was able to plant more. However, they are in a much better state and have grown much better than in the same soil blocks. And I think that's because of the size of the seed. So it's quite a hard seed and it was quite a big seed. So trying to sow that into a small one is quite difficult. Whereas, let's go here. So if we look at the zinnias, they're average size seeds and they've grown absolutely fine. You know, there is a few that haven't germinated, but on the whole, we're doing well. So a lot of seeds will work, but some won't, and you need to be careful about that. So you might still have to resort to the seed trays if you've got a big seed that you need to plant. The final and possibly the biggest problem I have with soil blocks is they are less forgiving. So I can forget to water the seed trays and it's not going to be the end of the world. I can forget for a couple of days and it's not going to be the end of the world. If I forget to water the seed trays, the soil blocks, if I forget to water the soil blocks, then you could kill all of the plants on that tray. The same with overwatering. I could probably overwater those trays, and as long as I allow them to dry, they will be fine. If I overwater the soil blocks, they will feel the impact much more profoundly than a seed tray. So you can get algae growth quite quickly. So if I look, I don't know whether you can see, I have watered all of these trays consistently, but we've got a bit of algae growth appearing there because I've watered them perhaps too much. On the whole, they're fine, so it's only a small section of that. But I have a little bit of algae growth growing on the seed trays, and it's not harmed the growth of those seeds. So you have to put more effort into maintaining your seed blocks than you do seed trays. And that's probably my biggest problem. My ethos is I don't want to create work for myself. I want a cutting garden that is easy. I don't want to have to dig. I don't want to have to be precious about everything I do. Soil blocking so far means that I need to spend more effort in monitoring their progress, whereas the seed trays are quick to sow, they get done, and actually I can probably grow those on and plant them straight out. I don't need to repot them. So again, less processes, less effort. At the moment, the jury is a bit out because it is convenient in the space saving. So in winter, this is an unheated greenhouse. In February, early March, if I want to be sowing seeds, these are useful to have inside because they don't take up much space, and I can get a lot of plants started on just one small tray. Whereas having lots of seed trays in the house will be messy, and I'm sure my husband wouldn't like it. But once the weather starts warming up a bit, then seed trays, as far as I'm concerned, are the way to go. So really you just need to, it's a matter of the space you have and how much effort you want to take. And for me, I want to minimise the effort because I've got so much other things on. So therefore I will be parking the soil blocking for the time being, and will be continuing sowing my seeds in seed trays. I really want to buy into the ethos of soil blocking, of being environmentally friendly, of being healthier for the plants. But from my experiments, or from my use and the way that I plant, and you know, I'm sure I could be doing something wrong, or there may be better ways of doing things, I'm just not seeing the benefits. Other than in this one instance, I was able to plant a whole heap of plants at my parents' house and then transport them back to me, back with me, without damaging any. But other than that, I am not seeing any benefit for growing, using soil blocking for healthy plant development. If you're a fan of soil blocking, please let me know in the comments below what you find is a good way of using them, of how handy they are, anything that let me catch on and make my use of them better.